3 days after my wife died, my own son had security guards throw me out of her funeral. I wish I could say there was some misunderstanding, some mistake that was later fixed, but there wasn't. My name is Frank. I am 67 years old, and for 41 years, Eleanor was the center of my life. We met when we were young, fell in love quickly, got married, raised a son, paid off mortgages, buried pets, celebrated anniversaries, and built a life together, one simple day after another. Just 3 days before the funeral, I sat next to her hospital bed and held her hand as she took her last breath. I thought that moment would be the deepest pain I would ever feel. I had no idea what was coming next. The morning of the service was cold and dull. Rain covered the parking lot when I arrived at the funeral home, wearing the dark gray suit Eleanor had given me for our 40th wedding anniversary. She used to joke that it made me look like someone important. In my jacket pocket was the speech I had stayed up all night writing. I wanted everyone there to remember who she truly was. Not just a wife or a teacher, but someone who made every room feel warmer just by being in it. I took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. Before I could reach the door, 2 men stepped in front of me. One raised his hand. "Sir, you can't go inside," he said. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I even smiled a little. "There must be some confusion. I'm Eleanor's husband." The younger guard looked at a clipboard and shook his head. "I have instructions, sir." For a moment I just stood there, unable to understand what I was hearing. My wife was inside that building. Her funeral was about to begin. "Instructions from who?" I asked again, but neither man answered. Then I looked through the glass doors and saw my son Bradley standing inside the lobby. Relief hit me for a second because I thought he would fix this. Of course he would. But then our eyes met, and instead of walking over, instead of saying anything, he turned away. He just walked off like he hadn't seen me at all. No confusion, no apology, nothing. I felt my stomach drop. 3 days earlier, I had watched Eleanor die. I had arranged the service, written the obituary, called the family, and tried to prepare a goodbye worthy of her. And yet I was standing outside her funeral like a stranger. I tried to step forward again, but the larger guard placed a hand on my chest and pushed me back. Not violently, just firmly enough to show I wasn't getting in. I called her name once, then again, then again. People arriving started to stare. Some friends, some neighbors, some former co-workers. They all walked past me. No one asked why a husband was being stopped at his wife's funeral. Eventually, they told me to sit on a bench near the edge of the parking lot. So I did, and the service went on without me. Rain soaked through my suit. My hair stuck to my forehead. Through the side window, I could see people inside the chapel. At one point, I saw Bradley stand to speak. I couldn't hear a word. I just watched like I didn't belong there. An hour later, it was over. The hearse came around, and men carried Eleanor's coffin outside. I should have been beside her. I should have been saying goodbye. Instead, I was alone in the rain watching her leave. That was the moment something inside me changed. The grief didn't disappear, but something else grew underneath it. Something sharper. When the hearse drove away, I sat in my car for a long time. My hands were shaking. I stared at my phone. For 41 years, Eleanor had been the person I turned to for everything. Now there was silence. Then I remembered someone else. I found the number of Whitman Greer, my lawyer and oldest friend. We had known each other for more than 40 years. He had helped me through everything. My mother's death, my business sale, every major decision. He answered quickly. "Frank," he said, "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" I tried to speak, but I couldn't at first. Then everything came out. The guards, the bench, the rain, Bradley turning away. There was a long silence after I finished. Then he asked, "Are you in your car?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "Do not go to the cemetery. Do not go to the reception. Go home." His tone had changed, calm but serious. "Whitman, what are you talking about?" I asked. "Do you remember what we set up years ago?" I knew exactly what he meant. "Yes." "And the updates in Mumbai?" My chest tightened. "Yes." "Then listen," he said. "Go home. I'll be there soon. Don't talk to anyone until I arrive." The call ended. For the first time that day, I wasn't only grieving, I was confused and uneasy. I drove home through heavy rain and sat at the kitchen table. The house felt empty. Eleanor's glasses were still beside the newspaper. A half-finished crossword was still there, untouched. It felt like time had stopped. 2 hours later, Whitman arrived without knocking. He walked in, sat down, and looked at me. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. The guards, Bradley, the rain, everything. When I finished, he opened a thick folder and placed it on the table. "Before we talk about today," he said, "you need to remember what's already in place." He showed me documents I had almost forgotten. The company I thought I had fully sold, I hadn't. I still held a large share through a trust. Bradley didn't know. Then came the house, the home Bradley and his wife lived in. It wasn't theirs, it was legally mine. Then came another file, his wife's business funding. The money she believed was a gift was actually a structured loan with signed agreements. Then my granddaughter's education fund, almost $500,000, fully protected and untouched. Piece by piece, the truth became clear. Bradley had been living a life built on things he didn't fully understand. Whitman leaned back. "Your son thinks he's in control," he said quietly. "He isn't." Then he paused. "But that's not the real issue." I looked at him. "Then what is?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another folder and placed a single document in front of me. "This," he said, "is what Eleanor changed before she died." My hands went cold as I read it. Her will had been rewritten. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. The estate no longer went mainly to Bradley. Instead, it was placed into a protected trust for our granddaughter, Lily. I couldn't understand it at first. "Why would she do this without telling me?" Whitman answered quietly. "Because she saw things you didn't want to see." That sentence stayed in the room like a weight. He continued, reading Eleanor's own words from his notes. She had become worried about Bradley and his wife, about how they were changing, about how money was affecting them. Then Whitman looked at me. "There is one line she repeated more than anything else," he said. I swallowed. "What was it?" He looked directly at me and began to speak. He looked at me in disbelief. "Dad, I'm not done." I pushed another set of papers across the table toward him. "The financial support you've relied on for so many years is over. Every account, every guarantee, every safety net. It's all finished." The room went completely quiet. Bradley lowered his gaze to the documents, but it was clear he could barely take them in. For the first time in his life, he was being forced to face the truth behind the life he believed he had built. Then I moved to what mattered most. Lily's trust stays untouched. He looked up at once. "What?" "Your mother made that choice herself. That money belongs to Lily. It will cover her education, her future, and any path she chooses. You and Cassandra will never control it." He gave a slow nod. Even now he couldn't argue. Deep inside, he knew his mother had always been trying to protect her granddaughter. Tears ran down his face again. "Dad, please don't do this." I held his gaze for several seconds before I answered. "Bradley, I sat on a bench in the rain while your mother's funeral went on without me." He shut his eyes. "I know. No, you don't." My voice stayed steady, but every word carried years of hurt. "You don't know what it feels like when your own child chooses comfort over loyalty. You don't know what it feels like to lose your wife and your son on the same day." He lowered his head, and the silence stretched on, heavy and endless. Finally, I stood and gathered the papers. The conversation was finished. The decisions had already been made. Bradley pushed himself up too. He looked older than he had just an hour earlier. At the door, he stopped and turned back once more. "Is there anything I can do?" For a moment, I thought about everything that had brought us here. Then I spoke honestly. "You can live with what you've done and learn from it." He nodded once, opened the door, and left. I watched him walk down the driveway and disappear into the distance. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel relieved. I felt something heavier than either of those things. Because sometimes the hardest thing a parent does is stop shielding a child from the consequences they've created for themselves. The months that followed were far harder on Bradley than I ever expected. At first, he resisted everything. He brought in lawyers, made calls, searched for any way to reverse what was happening. But the problem wasn't confusion or unfairness. The problem was that every document had been signed long ago, and every step was legally binding. One by one, the structures he depended on began to collapse. 31 days after that conversation, he moved out of the house. The place that once symbolized success no longer belonged to him. A few weeks later, Cassandra's business started to fall apart under financial strain. Clients pulled away, projects stopped, and the company she had proudly built began to crumble. Not long after, everything she had tried to protect with image and pride began slipping through her hands. Then came the final break. 6 weeks after losing the house, Cassandra filed for divorce. People around them said the arguments had become constant. Stress, money problems, and the sudden loss of their lifestyle exposed cracks that had been there for years. When the money disappeared, the illusion disappeared with it. Bradley moved into a small apartment across town. The luxury cars were gone. The expensive dinners were gone. The identity he had built over the years vanished almost overnight. For the first time as an adult, he was left alone with his own choices. Months passed without a word between us. I focused on rebuilding what was left of my life. Some days were manageable, others weren't. Eleanor's absence never stopped being present. I would notice her empty chair, hear a song she used to like, or find one of her notes tucked away somewhere. Grief doesn't vanish. It simply learns how to sit beside you. 14 months after our last conversation, a letter arrived, handwritten on yellow paper, 8 pages long. The moment I saw the handwriting, I knew it was from Bradley. I almost threw it aside. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and read it. What struck me first was what wasn't there. No requests, no demands, no attempts to get anything back, no blaming others. For the first time, he wrote with honesty. He admitted he had allowed Cassandra to influence decisions he should have taken responsibility for. He admitted he had ignored his mother in her final years. He admitted that the image of me sitting outside the funeral home had stayed with him every single day since. He wrote about nights spent awake, replaying that moment, wishing he could undo it. By the final page, I realized I wasn't reading the same man who had sat across from me 14 months earlier. In the last paragraph, he asked only one thing: to meet for breakfast at the old diner our family used to visit when he was a child. I stared at the letter for a long time. For the first time since Eleanor passed, I felt that maybe my son finally understood what he had lost, and why. 2 weeks later, I went. The diner hadn't changed. The booths were still worn in the same places. The smell of coffee was the same. Even the waitress looked familiar. When I stepped inside, Bradley was already waiting. He looked different. Not just older, but stripped down in a way I couldn't ignore. The pride was gone. The arrogance was gone. Life had taken away the version of himself he used to hide behind. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he spoke quietly. "Thank you for coming." I gave a small nod but said nothing. I wasn't there for instant forgiveness, and he didn't expect it. For the next hour, he talked. He didn't excuse anything. He didn't shift blame. He spoke about his mistakes, his decisions, and the moments he wishes he could take back. He admitted he had always chosen the easiest path when things got difficult. He admitted he had let others steer choices that should have been his alone. And he admitted the moment he turned away from me at the funeral was the worst decision he had ever made. When he finished, I believed him, not because of emotion, but because of honesty. For once, he wasn't defending himself, he was accepting it. I stirred my coffee and looked out the window before speaking. "I don't know if things can ever go back to what they were." He lowered his eyes. "I know. Some things leave marks. I know that too." Silence settled again. Then I said something I had been thinking about for a long time. "You're still Lily's father." His head lifted quickly. "And she's going to need one." Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't hide them this time. That was the beginning. Not a perfect ending, not a clean resolution, just a beginning. Over time, things slowly shifted. Lily started spending Saturdays with me again. Sometimes we baked, sometimes we worked on puzzles at the same table Eleanor once sat at. Later, Bradley joined us occasionally. It wasn't the same as before. It might never be. There would always be a gap between us. There would always be that day at the funeral. But something had changed too. I finally understood what Eleanor had known long before I did. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't erase pain. It doesn't require forgetting. It only allows you to stop carrying everything forever. The final lesson my wife left behind was simple but hard to live by. Love is not permission. You can love someone deeply and still refuse behavior that breaks a family. You can leave space for return without pretending nothing happened. Now, Lily still comes over on Saturdays. Bradley calls every Sunday, and Eleanor's chair remains empty across the table. I miss her every day. I always will. But when I look at what's left of my family, I understand she was right. Sometimes the people we love most only learn through consequences, and sometimes the hardest form of love is stepping back and letting those consequences speak.